Welcome, welcome, and welcome to a new DJ Wilson STEM video. This video is going to be highlighting information from our Unit 3 from Goodhart Wilcott's book, Exploring Design, Technology, and Engineering, the third edition. Obviously, this is for my class, but those of you that find engineering and technology interesting, this will be a good topic for you. All right, so let's get started with what we're going to talk about today. So our agenda is going to be, we want to talk about the objectives for this particular chapter. We'll talk about the essential question that should guide our research and understanding of this chapter. And we'll also talk about technological ages, technological resources, the scope of technology, and we will end on those all very important technological facts. Okay. All right. So our objectives for chapter 3 are that students will get to know the major technological ages, okay, which are somewhat different from many of the ages out there, but they're going to talk about the major technological ages. Students will have a better understanding of what influences the evolution of and creation of technology, those things that influence us to create stuff. And students will develop an understanding of technological resources. So the essential question that I'm positing is, how has the development of technology evolved along with the needs and wants of society? And then, how has the development of technology over the past 5 years influenced you? All right, so again, how has the development of technology evolved along with the needs and wants of society? And how has the development of technology over the past 5 years influenced you? Now, I want you to be specific in your response, a minimum of 2 complete claim, cite, and clarify paragraphs, and then we need to make sure that we cite information from our notes. Because again, we just don't make points, we also need to justify our reasoning behind why it is what we think. All right, so let's start off with some historical context. So one, technology has always been with us. So we humans, again, we define technology, right, is the application of science, technology, engineering, and math to create things, okay? Well, we define technology as things that humans have made to solve a want or need. Okay, things that humans have made to solve a want or need. We also define or include technology as that it can always be improved. So one of the things about technology is that a shoe, which is technology, has not always started off that way. Somebody identified a problem. Hey, my these stones hurt as I'm walking on them. So somebody developed, okay, well, let me put this on the bottom of my feet that the stones don't hurt so much. And then somebody came along and said, well, I have this different material. And somebody said, well, I can strap these material onto my feet. And then somebody said, well, I can come up with something that's a little bit more comfortable and durable. And then we have what you have now, where there's so many different types of shoes. CrossFit shoes, basketball shoes, football shoes, and cleats and boots and steel-toed boots. So again, technology can always be improved. Okay, technology has certainly gradually developed over time, just like we just said with the shoe example. Right, shoes have been in place for who knows how many thousands of years, right? But they've continuously, gradually developed over time. So the first major technological age that we are going to talk about is the Stone Age. And in your worksheet, where it says the time period, the first thing I want you to do is you're going to write the time period of up to 3500 BC. Now, we don't know exactly when the Stone Age ended, but this is around about time. So we're guessing here, but uh, archaeologists and scientists believe that we're pretty close with this. Okay, so what were some of the things that were going on in the Stone Age? So the first thing was that inventions were developed without necessarily the knowledge of science. So we created stuff just because we needed it. It wasn't that we put a grand thought process behind what it is that we were creating. It was we needed something, so we figured out something to create to solve that need. Creativity was used to develop tools from stone. So we created things based out of stone. That was what we could use. So as you can see in the picture down at the bottom, we had arrows and various other stones that we used to maybe build different things, or if we were eating something, or if humans caught an animal, they'd have to deal with the flesh of the animal, so there'd be sharp stones to do certain things with. We built arrowheads and various structures from stone. Also, one of the biggest things in the Stone Age was the use of fire was mastered. All right. Now, after the Stone Age came the Bronze Age. Now, there's who knows why and how we developed the Bronze Age, but one of the things that many researchers feel is that somewhere along the line, some brilliant early human recognized that you could smelt or you could melt certain metals or hard substances, and that you could mold them into the shape that you wanted. And therefore, that began the Bronze Age. So, in the Bronze Age, the time period was about 3500, so right after the Stone Age, up until about 1000 BC. Okay? And in the Bronze Age, farming was developed. So we stopped being nomadic and started settling down a little bit. And one of the reasons why we could do that is because we started understanding, or humans started learning, how to farm, how to put seed in the ground and grow food. But because of the fact that we were using bronze tools, we could make different equipment that made farming easier than if we tried doing that out of stone. Okay? Another thing that started happening in this Bronze Age was people started settling in villages and cities. Again, once we started learning how to grow food and do things in one stationary place, we stopped having to chase the food, right? And we could actually start to grow the food that we wanted. All right. And one of the biggest things that we just talked about is metal tools replaced stone ones. We also developed better building techniques because we had stronger materials. This bronze, we could chip things down. We could mold things into various shapes that we needed for beams or whatever we needed. We could make out of this bronze stuff or these metals. Okay. So after the Bronze Age, and again, we as this amazingly brilliant human species, we realized that, hey, if we could do these things with bronze, well, maybe there's other materials out there that we can use that are just as strong as bronze or stronger than bronze and easier to work with. And one of those materials that we found was iron. And the Iron Age was from about 1000 BC to 500 BC. Now, there were a lot of different things that were going on in the Iron Age. And again, we know that the early humans in the Bronze Age were able to melt shapes and were able to melt bronze and put it into shapes and mold it into what they needed. And they still did the same thing with iron. But because iron was stronger, there was more things that we could do with it, but it also required more skilled labor. Okay, so in the Iron Age, iron became the primary tool making material, and a big reason for this, like we just said, is that iron was stronger than bronze. And actually, I'm going to take a quick step back, and I just want to make sure that those of you that are taking notes and are researching and looking at some of this information, one of the things that consistently propels us as this amazing, brilliant human species forward is that we were created, and that to always move forward, to figure out new things, right? And so excuse me. And so that now that iron became the primary tool making material, we started thinking about, okay, there were great things that we could do with the bronze stuff, but we realized there were some faults, there were some issues with it, and we wanted to make sure that we gave ourselves an edge. And again, it wasn't always peaceful back in the early human times. We know that there were wars and there was violence between various tribes all over. And the key that would allow certain groups of humans to prevail is their technology or skill. And so during the Iron Age, right, you had people that wanted to increase their skill so that they could continue to expand and conquer. And again, not all places were like this, but we do need to understand that our human history has not always been peaceful. All right, so let's get back to this Iron Age, okay? So we talked about it being from about 1000 BC to 500 BC. Iron became the primary tool-making material. Agriculture techniques improved, obviously, because iron was stronger than bronze. You could do more things. You could dig deeper into the ground. You could build various things to hold water in place, aqueducts or various things to get water from one place to another. And so agriculture techniques improved. We also were able to start building larger buildings and monuments. We were already be able to build large ones, but now we're able to build larger buildings and monuments. Why? Because iron was stronger and it could support more weight. We also understand that road systems were developed. Again, one of the things that happened, right, was that as people started developing and settling in these cities in the Iron Age, these cities started to vastly grow and get bigger. And in order to communicate and trade and get from place to place, there had to be various road systems or pathways to get from one place to another. All right. Which brings us to the Industrial Age. So the Industrial Age was, and again for the time period, was about from 1750 to the 1900s. Now you might be saying, whoa, Mr. Wilson, Mr. J. Will. Listen, what happened from 500 BC, from the end of the Iron Age until 1750? Well, there was a lot of different things that happened in there. There were the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, the Renaissance. There was a lot of different things that happened. But we are talking about the major technological ages for this particular presentation. Okay? So I don't want you to think we skipped anything, that you missed something. No, you didn't miss anything. We're talking about the 5 major technological ages. Okay? So, in the industrial age, from 1750 to the 1900s, demand for craftsmen grew. So here's what was happening in the industrial age. And then again, please make sure that you write this down in your notes, because this is definitely a test question. So in the industrial age, right, we stopped necessarily focusing on better materials and started focusing more on process of creation and technology. So this is very important in the industrial age because we've really started getting great at mass producing in factories. And again, we're going to talk about this. And actually, let me do this. Let me move on with this in this slide, and then come back and start recapping some of these things. So in the industrial age, the focus shifted from agriculture to manufacturing. So again, we're talking mainly a lot about Western culture, okay? Because we do know that around the world, the various ages weren't always the same, right? It just wasn't. But in the industrial age for Western culture, around this time, a focus shifted from agriculture to manufacturing. So what ended up happening was, rather than farming and raising cattle, a lot more people started moving into cities and building stuff and working in factories in the cities to build various things, such as, again, from the 1750s to the 1900s, we know in the United States, there were a lot of things that happened during that time frame, right? We know that the Revolutionary War, right, the War of 1812, the Civil War, Reconstruction, in the early 1900s, we developed the internal combustion engine, and cars and planes and flight. So there was a lot of different things that happened during this industrial age, right? So rather than people being agrarian, they started moving into cities, and cities started becoming even more diverse, all right, and with even more people. Factories increased rapidly because of the need for various things. So again, when we talked about those various wars or various things that happened in the industrial age from 1750 to 1900s, well, factories needed to produce boats and weapons and foods and tables and chairs and all of these different things, right? So these factories increased rapidly. New transportation and communication technologies, so the telegram, the telephone, all of these things started really ramping up in the industrial age. New power sources, from steam power to coal to electricity. So all of these things started happening. Now, one of the biggest things that really, as far as human-wise, that started happening was division of labor. And division of labor is, there's always been a head, there's always been a foreman, on a work site. But then you had people that were specialized in certain areas, okay? So for example, in factories, you had certain people that made one part, and you had another group of people that made other parts, and you had another group of people that made other parts. And then you had an assembler who took all those different parts and put them together to make whatever widget that they were creating, okay? So as you'll notice, that there was a lot of different things that were going on in this amazing, prosperous industrial age, right? A lot of great things. Which leads us to the information age. And one of the things, again, I want you to make sure you write down, this is certainly going to be on the test. So we realize those first three ages, the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, and the Iron Age, are really focused a lot on materials. And then the Industrial Age is when we stopped focusing so much on materials and started focusing on process. Well, the Information Age, we still focused on process, but we now focus more on the acquisition of information, okay, and transferring and acquiring information and transferring that information. And so the important thing, let's talk about the time period first. So the Information Age goes from the late 1900s to the present day, right? So we could say from the invention of the computer, right, until the present day. Okay? So a few things started happening in the Information Age, right? So what's the one? We started getting rapid changes in technology. So it doesn't take us long to think about this, that from the beginning of cell phones, right, that every year a new iPhone or a new Samsung Galaxy or a Nokia or LG or a new phone comes out every year, right? Or actually every couple of months, but they just keep upgrading the phones. New computers come out all the time, increasing their power and their ability to conduct transactions with the processor. So a lot of rapid changes in technology happened. The computer was developed. Information processing and automation became common. So no more was it that there's a great movie called Hidden Figures. In the movie, you had these women who they were called computers because they used to compute information. They were great at math and they would do all the handwork of math and the calculations. But then, as we humans needed this information faster, we started calling on and programming machines to do this information and processing for us. So therefore, you didn't need someone to calculate the escape velocity for a rocket that weighed so much. You didn't have to do that. You could actually just go to a computer, punch a couple numbers in, and pow, it gives you the information that you need. We also started thinking, or in the Information Age, people started becoming very connected to technology. And we know that this is true because each of us is very connected to something that humans make. Because remember, technology is things that humans have created to solve a want or a need, right? So, computers, cell phones, watches, clothes, right? Lights, air conditioning, heat. So all these different things, we humans have started becoming very connected to. All right, so that's the end of the Information Age. But there's a section on your paper that says scope of technology. And I want to talk about this a little bit. Now you'll notice that it says local, national, and global. So local will, and again, write this down. So most creations, most inventions that we humans need or want are created at the local level for local needs. Okay? So most things are created locally for immediate wants and needs. And then you have national. But for national, you still have a lot of things made for national purposes, right? But certainly not as much as for local. But those national things, they can have a greater impact or greater influence over um, or of why they were created. Okay, and then you have a global scope, which is even fewer things are created globally or for a global purpose. However, those things that were created for a global purpose, right, can have a huge impact on human society. So when we talk about the scope of technology, we talk about, yes, the majority of things are created for the local level, but they'll have an immediate local level impact. And then you have fewer things that were created nationally, but they would have a greater national impact. And even fewer things created globally, but they would have a potential of having a huge global impact. And then we'll talk about technological resources. So, technological resources are anything that we humans, in a sense, need. And the first, or one of those first things that we'll talk about is people, time, money or capital, our knowledge, and resources. Okay? So, let's talk about this. So, people, obviously, in order for us to create anything, you need people. And some people might say, well, we could create machines to do that. Well, there need to be people to build and to program the machines to do what we need them to do. We need time, because we humans, we're not God, so we can't just say something and it comes into existence. We need time to construct something. Capital is also considered money. Our knowledge, so our understanding to be able to create things, and our resources, those things that we use, so tools, wood, fire, sand. We'd have to have those resources. And we kind of broke then the resources into two main parts. Okay, there's renewable resources and exhaustible resources, or non-renewable resources. Okay, so renewable resources are resources that will continually renew themselves over and over and over. Okay, so some of these are we consider inexhaustible resources, or resources that don't run out. And some examples are wind power, solar power, and hydropower. So hydropower, obviously, we could have a hydro turbine that is next to a river, and the water runs over and turns the turbine and creates electricity, right? Solar power, many of these are on people's roofs or fields of solar panels, and they collect the radiation from the sun and provide electricity. You have wind power, right? So all of these could be considered renewable resources. Then you also have non-renewable resources, and non-renewable resources are resources that will eventually run out at some point, right? And some of those are oil and coal and methane gases. So a lot of these things we would consider are non-renewable resources. So let's talk about some important facts. So as we start wrapping this presentation up, so technology is neither good nor bad, but it depends on how it is used. So for example, a car is neither good nor bad, but it depends on how it's used. So if a car is used, to transport people to the hospital, to help people, well, then obviously it's good. But there are also certain situations with accidents where it's not so good. We also need to understand that choices result in desirable and undesirable outcomes. So when we are creating technology, right, there's going to be desirable outcomes and undesirable. Please make sure that you jot this down and make a mental note of this. Okay? So for example, when we created cars, many people were like, this is so excellent. We can get places faster. We can get there more comfortably, right? However, those are desirable outcomes. But undesirable outcomes would be pollution that cars have, right? The potential for car accidents and injuries. Those would be undesirable outcomes, right? We could say the same thing with planes. We could say the same thing with electricity and lights and all these things, like lights, right? A desirable outcome is that I flip a switch so light comes on, I can see during the night, right? An undesirable outcome for lights is that it requires electricity, right? And electricity can hurt people, right? It can happen. So we also want to talk about that societies used the resources that were available. So when a society or a human species, right, settled or built a city in a specific area, many times they used the resources that were available to them. So for example, societies that really developed near a lot of water, right? Well, they certainly had boats available to them because that was important. They couldn't just swim everywhere they needed to go because, well, there are things in the water called sharks, so they couldn't just swim anywhere. So they had to build boats, and they had to learn how to build bridges. And the same thing with people that lived in deserts and areas without a lot of water. Well, they had to find water, so they dug deep wells and got water. And we do know that the desert, there are a lot of things that in the desert, that's how they learned how to make bricks and sand and many of these stone monuments and temples and stuff like that in Africa and in Egypt. They built these things out of those materials, right? And as I was just talking about, societies develop based upon their needs and resources. And societies also develop trade based on their needs and resources and what their neighbors' needs and resources were. So for example, if we were next to a river, right? But one of our neighbors lived in a hugely wooded area, well, we needed wood, so we would trade our fish because it was easy for us to catch a whole bunch of fish and preserve the fish and take the fish to them, and then they would cut down a whole bunch of trees that we needed for our boats or for our buildings or whatever we needed, right? And that's how trade was developed. You need something and I got it, well, let's trade. All right, so questions. Yes, I did pause for questions, and if you asked a question, you asked the video a question. But no big deal. No big deal. But anyway, thanks again for watching, and if you have questions, well, for my students, please feel free to ask in class. And to the rest of you, I hope that this was enlightening and enjoyable. And please always remember, #GoBuildSomethingCool. Thanks.